So, kept you waiting, huh? Sorry. You watched the previous video where I and a few visitors tried explaining how to loot and craft in Until Return. Did you know that it's free on Steam? But during the video you may have seen some parts that have been left out. Yes, planning. The menu that puts even the most stoic Aya players into uncontrollable fear due to the requirement of making choices. And good golly, there sure are a lot of them. Well, have no fear, friend, for I have left my cave, once again, to help you out with making sense of everything here. Because loadouts are, for a lack of a better word, essential. As the benefits of having yours equipped skyrockets your character's capabilities in so many ways that I am here making an entire video to explain them. Before I start, a few disclaimers. Firstly, I am not, I repeat, not a professional when it comes to all of this. I am explaining everything that I know from my own experience and with the help of some folks that I have with me. I won't be here to tell you how to make the mother of all loadouts here, Jack. I'm only going to tell you how it works so you can do it yourself. Secondly, due to the nature of loadouts, there will be times where I'll be going down to the numbers. And sometimes even beyond that. So if you're worried about the video getting a little nerdy, there's your warning. I'll try to make it as brief and comprehensive as possible, but no promises. Alright, formalities out of the way, it's time to try and help you understand how to plan an Eternal Return. To start things off, allow me to say this. Before you bring up the menu to start making loadouts, you're gonna need one thing to be clear. Intent. Loadouts are very customizable, as they can enable your character to do almost anything. Because of this, you should have a clear idea on what you're intending to do with your character of choice. Some examples, like wanting to play the role of a tank, getting in big fights, and leaving with only a few scars to show off. How about a glass cannon? Or somewhere in between. A character's base stats and kit will give you the general idea on how you can play them, while a loadout is there to enable how you want to play them. Every character in the game has distinct strengths and weaknesses, barring some exceptions, so assess what they are and make a loadout according to it. Alright, now let's get on to actually making the loadout, starting off with the boring stuff. Stats! I'll try to be quick, I promise. At the baseline, one of the main goals that your loadouts are meant to fulfill is to make your numbers go up. But once you open up that menu, you'll notice that there are a lot of numbers to increase. While this seems overwhelming at first, you can relax knowing that regardless of which character you're making a loadout for, these are the only ones you really have to care about. All the other stats are more important depending on the character you're making the loadout for. Otherwise, they're mostly niche, and you wouldn't really need to target them. You can also hover your mouse over the icons and the game will tell you what those stats are, including some extra details about them. But hold on a second. You may have noticed that the two top stats there are attack power and skill amplification. Both of these stats increase your damage. So which one should you prioritize?
Alright, so here's what you gotta do. Head to the character's profile, click up here on the weapon icons. Underneath, it'll show you which stat each of them focus on. For example, Hyunwoo has two distinct playstyles that both prefer different weapons. Weapons in Hyunwoo experience beat people up with delicious self-healing punches. This one prefers attack power to make your attack stronger. This other playstyle which can best be summarized with
Slippery little bastard!
prefers Tonfa, which supplies skill amplification for Hyunwoo. Depending on which weapon you put on changes which stat gradually increases when you raise this thing here, your mastery level. We'll get into this in detail some other time, but to dumb it down, this number goes up as you need weapons and hurt things. Okie
I should also mention that the weapon types themselves aren't tied to a specific stat. If we take Hyunwoo as an example again, whenever he's running around with gloves, he prefers attack power, but a different character like Alonzo prefers skill amplification despite also being a glove user. So whenever you're selecting a character before a match, pay attention to that little icon on top of their choice of weapons, as that will tell you what stat you should go for whenever you're making a loadout for them.
Wait a second, forgot to mention how some characters scale with other stats besides those two.
Yes, there are in fact a select few characters whose skills and abilities get a nice boost from other stats beyond attack power and skill amp. Does the game tell you about these? No, not really. Once you're in game, you can get more details on how your skills work by holding Alt, which will allow you to see what your abilities scale with, down to their percentages. For example, Marcus over here has his skills not only scale with attack power, but also his max HP. So whenever you make a loadout for him, you can also favor anything that increases or interacts with his max HP, besides just going for attack power. Okay, you awake? We're done talking about stats and scaling now. We can get to the fun part! So besides making numbers go up, Certain equipment in the game also carry a unique passive with them. Some of the benefits they offer go from a funny gimmick that can help out in a pinch to downright essential to give you that edge to winning certain matchups. So don't go ignoring the items with the extra bit of text at the bottom just because their numbers aren't as high as the ones without them. There's a reason for that, it's right there. Oh, also those passives don't stack with each other, so if you're thinking of stacking heal cut, it's not gonna work out. Right, so you finally decided on what items you're gonna try to craft. That's already miles better than most people nowadays. You should feel proud. But don't forget that you now have to figure out how to get all the materials you need to make it in the first place. Which leads us to... You glanced at all your options and finally settled on a loadout. What's next is setting up the route so you can make the damn thing. If you click on this arrow over on the right, Lumia Island's map will appear and all the zones that contain the items that you seek. What you can do here is click on a zone to have it be where you'll start your crafting adventure. Any subsequent clicks on the other zones will add these zones to your route in sequential order. You can click on a zone you've already clicked on before to deselect it from your route, in case you change your mind. So now the obvious question is, how should I route my plan? Start by looking at these items that are on the left. These are all the materials that you're gonna need to craft your master plan, and all of them are gonna show up over the map here. To let you know which zone has which item, anytime you select a zone for your route, some items are gonna disappear off the map, and the item list on the left will have some checked out. That zone has all of those required items, and you can now move on to the rest. Repeat this until every item is checked out, and boom. You now have a route to follow to make your loadout. Naturally, depending on how you'll set up your route, you'll have one that'll take less zones to finish, and vice versa. So you're gonna have to click around until you feel satisfied with the path you selected. If all of this seems like it takes too much effort to do, there's a handy button over on the right that'll basically do all of this for you. But, to incentivize you to do it yourself, I'm gonna give you a neat trick that the auto path thingy doesn't do for you. Drones. In the case you've got a path that only travels to 2 zones, but you've got 1 or 2 loose items around, putting a curve to this master plan of yours, you can simply set it so that you order these items through drones instead. That way, instead of spending time walking to a new zone and trying to look for these items, you can spend a few credits instead and have it already be in your inventory from the get-go. To do this, simply double-click the loose items in this shopping list of yours and boom, mark for drone calls. Convenient, right? Anyways, there is one more hurdle that we will need to talk about when it comes to this topic, but let's put a pin on that for later when it's more appropriate. For now, on to the next step. Up next is tactical skills. If you've played a certain popular MOBA besides this one, these are akin to summoner spells, universal abilities that any character can use. I could list you what each of them do, but I won't. You can look at them yourself in your own time. But to briefly go over them generally, you can only have one of these skills available in the game, and you're stuck with them for the entirety of that match. Each of them have different effects when put to use, and their effectiveness obviously depends on the character whose loadout this belongs to. They have their own cooldowns, and can be leveled up to shorten that cooldown, while also adding an extra effect alongside their existing one. How do you level them up? Through attack skill module, which is an item you can get in game. Alright, now to talk about the sauce. The second half of what makes loadouts tick. Augments. If you've played that game before, these are your rooms. There are 4 categories for augments, and each one allows your character to better specialize in whatever role you've decided to stick them into. Havoc focuses on consistent, unrelenting damage, rewarding high DPS. Chaos leans more towards burst damage, so your big explosions get to feel like an even bigger explosion. Fortification will allow you to shrug things off a little easier than usual. And finally, support will grant you extra buffs for you or your team for whenever the going gets a little too tough to handle. Once you pick one, you can then decide on a core augment. These augments give your character that extra kick in whatever you want them to do, followed by 2 secondary augments that are not meant to be as impactful, but still incredibly useful when put to use. Once you have those selected, you can then choose an extra 2 secondary augments from a different category, which allows you to sand down any bumps you might have. You got all that? I hope so, because besides your equipment, augments are what allow your character to get away with whatever it is you want them to do. So if you're planning to tank, Fortifications augments will make that job easier for you. Or chaos, being chaos, because sometimes you just want to nuke a motherfucker. Now, this is the part of the video where it completely falls on you to decide what late game items to slap onto your build. So the best I can do for you here is explain the menu itself and a few hitches you might run into. So once you finish your purple items that you set up before, the game will automatically set your next goal to your late game gear, which you can list here. You can have multiple rows of loadouts here, but the one that gets automatically swapped to after your purple stuff will always be the top one. As for why you can have multiple rows, I'll tell you in a bit. Regardless, all you really have to do here is essentially the exact same same as what you did when you were selecting your purple loadout. Hell, some yellow items are functionally what you already have, but with way better stats, and sometimes even a new passive. Though not all of them. There are a lot of late game gear that come with stats and gimmicks of their own that don't completely replicate the stats that your old gear would have. Most of the time it would hardly matter, but it's worth bringing up all the same. And now to talk about why you'd want to have multiple rows of late game items. See, unlike your purple gear, each yellow gear requires rare, special materials. And in case you haven't played the game before, those materials are a luxury. You won't always have access to them. Whether it be because someone got to your tree first, or because you have to spend all of your dollar on bringing your friends back, and now you can't afford to buy them. The same can be said for rare materials that your loadout doesn't require. Let's say your late game requires nothing but trees. What happens when you get your hands on a meteorite? Sure, you could offer it to your friends instead, but you're not just gonna let it lay there for the enemy to pick up. This is where the other rows can come into play. Because getting your hands on rare materials isn't always guaranteed, and there's always a chance it ain't the one that you want, having backup plans for what you do get your hands on will help you out big time. Because usually, whatever the yellow items bring to the table, the trade-off is usually worth it compared to your purple gear. Alternatively, you could also drink them off. Now you may have noticed that some of these late game items are not yellow and are in fact blood red. These mythic items require VF blood to make, so they're colloquially called blood items. If yellow items are what make you extremely powerful, blood items are what turn you into a god of destruction. The stats on these? Monstrous. The passives? Beefy. The likelihood of you getting them? Very slim. Yeah, so as tempting as it may be to set your endgame loadout to be all blood items, remember how I said the reason why you can have multiple rows is to make up for times you don't get what you want? Well, I hate to break it to you, but getting one blood item is already hard enough. A full loadout is downright a pipe dream. The only times you're getting your hands on blood is when it's already very late into the game. So late, in fact, that by the time you do, you'll likely already have at least half of your yellow items already done and equipped, if not all of it. Think of blood as the end game items, something that you go for when you've already got yellow gear equipped. You could use the extra row of late game items for your loadout to consist of blood items, in the off chance you get your hands on a sample. Because no joke, these items are so good that even having one is enough to up your odds of winning. Any more is practically overkill, so if you can somehow afford yourself a second helping of blood, be sure to share with the class. Well, there you have it. That's the loadout menu, really roughly explained. Hey, what about that button at the end? Skill order? It's literally just setting the order at which you unlock your skills each level. I don't think you need me to explain that, since what you level first is on a character-by-character basis. Anyways, as I was saying, now that I've tried to explain how the menus work, all that's left for me is to hand off some extra bits of information that should help you out, and then it's off for you to go start theory crafting some nonsense for your favorite character. So allow me to start things off by talking about inventory, specifically how you manage it. In case you haven't noticed, your inventory space is very limited. You can't really carry a whole lot. Hell, you can't even grab all the materials you need to make your entire loadout unless you start using said materials to craft them into better materials. And speaking of which, let's go back to how you route your loadout. Having a short route is great and all, but you also need to consider how you're going to gather the materials, and if you'll even have the space in your inventory to carry them to the next zone. There's a button on the right that allows you to see how your inventory is going to shape up on your route, but normally you can figure this out by just sending your loadout to the test in training mode. Get a feel for it and see if you run into any problems with it. If you don't, then boom, you have a loadout ready, and all that's left is just send it out to the wild and see if it'll net you some kills, or even a win. If you do, then iron them out further, either by switching up the route or the order of which items you pick up and craft with first. Another tip I can offer you is that you don't necessarily have to make a loadout from scratch. If you've been using a loadout made by someone else and thought, this is great, but I wish it could be better at X, Y, or Z, then you can just go to your loadouts, check out that saved loadout you have, and edit it to suit your needs. Once you're done and save it, you'll have the original loadout you yoinked alongside the personal one you just made. Also, please don't focus so hard on getting VF blood. I get it, they're really damn good. Everyone and their mother wants a piece of that power. But you have to understand that yellow items are already pretty damn powerful themselves. The quote-unquote power spike you could get saving up for blood really early into the game is not as strong as getting 2, maybe even 3 shiny space rocks. Just think of VF blood as something you'll just naturally run into. Like oh nice, I can afford this now. Or, oh look, a crate, might as well. And not, if I don't get VF blood on night 3, then this game is as good as a loss. And finally, one last piece of advice to end this all off, which begins as a question. Why? Why would they bother making a loadout when others have already done it and are likely way more optimal than what I could possibly conjure up? Well, if being optimal is your only concern, why would you pick like 90% of the characters that exist in the game? Why not pick the best character in the meta, playing the best weapon and using the best loadout? If that's what you're into, that's fine. It ain't right of me to judge you for that, as much as it ain't right for you to judge others for not wanting to do that. For f***'s sake, my main is a 42-year-old camera grandma who's so fast she can get Usain Bolt to sweat. Never mind, they're stupid. They're stupid. They're a little goofy. They're a little goofy. Every popular loadout for her builds her with CDR and some armor penetration, yet I'm over here with glue in my nostrils running crit and attack speed with her, and I win games with these. The game allows us to turn any of their characters from walking behemoths to an overused joke, so have fun with it. Don't worry about whether or not it's optimal or if it's even remotely good. If you're having fun with it, then keep using it. And if you're still getting done with it, then clearly the rest of the world is just sleeping on it. So go out there and go nuts.